My guest on this week's episode of Suds Search is Matt Umbro, Key Account Director at Brainlabs. Matt is a veteran PPC marketer, one of my favorite bloggers on topics related to paid search and paid social. You can read some of his work at Search Engine Journal, Practical Ecommerce, and PPCHero. Matt is also an in-demand speaker and conference presenter. You may have heard Matt speak at SMX, Heroconf, State of Search, or Engage. Matt is also well known for founding PPC Chat, a weekly Twitter chat all about topics related to paid media. Matt doesn't handle the hashtag anymore, but he was able to build a really impressive community for PPC marketers. The timing of Matt's appearance was good for us at Suds Search. The past 12 months have been pretty volatile for people in paid media. Much of the conversation over at PPC Chat and on PPC blogs revolves around new privacy policies at Google and Facebook and their impact on digital marketing. I'll talk to Matt all about it and figure out whether he thinks we'll simply have to live with serving up less effective ads. Grab something cold to drink and join me for a conversation with Matt Umbro. We'll have a wide-ranging discussion on topics related to PPC, including Google making RSAs the default ad type. We'll chat about how people should use Google Ads recommendations. We'll talk about a recent change to keyword match types.
Matt Umbro, welcome to Suds Search. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Well, I think this is good timing. So there's a lot going on in the PPC world at the moment. You are the organizer of PPC Chat, one of the most recognized PPC people in the world. And you wrote an interesting blog post about this on the Practical Ecommerce blog. I'd like to ask you some questions about these changes and see what you might make of them. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good. And just to preface that as well, obviously there's that old saying, the one constant is change. And certainly in the digital marketing industry, that always rings true, to your point, especially over the past few months.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, the first thing you highlighted in the post was potentially some big news. There were 4 match types in Google for, I don't know how many years now. I think as long as I can remember anyway. I would like to plug Mark Irvin from our team. Also wrote a blog post about this, but it's kind of a shock to my senses. One of the match types is going away, and I wonder, for people in the trenches, is this really that much of a big deal? Is there any real effect to this change?
So I think if you just look at the announcement as is, it's a big shock in the industry. But when you start to decipher it a little bit more, it's not as big a deal. So modified broad match is going away. What made modified broad match so good, and modified broad match has been around for 10, 11 years or so. In fact, the way I structure campaigns, and we'll have to start changing now, but is using exact match and modified broad match. Because what modified broad match does is, the idea is you put the plus sign on each word within the query, and users don't have to use that. They don't have to put it in any particular order. But as long as all those specific terms are in the query, then the ad can show, which, with phrase match, you have to have that exact order in it. So, the same query, you can essentially have 10 times. With phrase match and modified broad match, you only do it once. So what Google's doing now is essentially, because phrase match has been around all this time, but it's been really de-emphasized by advertisers. So what Google is doing now is saying that modified broad match is essentially going to act like phrase match, but respect the order when it counts. For example, you wouldn't use modified broad match if you're selling flights from, Atlanta to Boston, because you want to make sure that you're doing the specific order. So in that sense, and with, Google showing variants for pretty much all the keyword match types, and
even exact,
and showing, audience signals being there. I mean, none of these match types have really been absolute for the last few years anyway. So to that end, modified broad match is essentially becoming phrase match. It's not a huge deal. Advertisers will have to update their accounts. Google saying you won't be able to add modified broad match after July. So they'll have to keep updating that, and I've already begun doing that in some accounts. But even still, it's not a huge it's not. I don't see it as a huge difference. It's just more of one of those. Google's making a rapid change, and you see the headline and get kind of frustrated with it. But digging deeper, it's not quite as bad.
Interesting. Yeah, I saw a tweet from Steve Hammer, and he said it's very odd to teach PPC and feel the need to explain the way it was, so that the way that it is makes sense. Do you ever feel this way about some of these?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because I've been in the industry now 14 years, and when I first started, came up as a rookie with opening day today. It's a apt metaphor.
Right. Let's play ball.
When I started PPC, there was exact match, phrase match, and broad match, and they worked exactly how you would expect them to. In fact, broad match didn't have the variants or the audience signals.
Not nearly as listed.
Yeah. So it's funny. I mean, you went from how PPC was the advertiser was very much in control to all of these matters, to the point where a lot of this control is being taken away for the machine learning. And take that with a little bit of grain of salt, because the machine learning is a lot better than it was when I started. But control is being taken away, and advertisers are being forced to adjust.
Yeah. Along those lines, in the same blog post I mentioned before, you noted that RSAs are now the default ad type. So this is the default ad type. Previously, it was expanded text ads. I would say this one feels like progress to me. You point out in the post that RSAs tend to elicit a higher click-through rate. They work well. There's no question we're at Search Lab big fans of RSAs. Explain what it means to make RSAs the default ad type, and why you weren't terribly surprised to see this change from Google.
Yeah, so I agree with you. RSAs, the idea of RSAs, I do like. The fact that Google will optimize toward the assets that are going to be seeing the best click-through rates. It's a little vague how they describe it in terms of whether it's conversion rates, cost per acquisitions as well, but I do like that notion. I think the problem with RSAs has always been the lack of transparency that Google provides. You can't see which assets are getting the best click-through rates or the best conversion rates. You can only see essentially how many impressions each type of combination received, which is tough. So I think if Google were to share the conversion metrics for all the different assets and combinations, then advertisers would have a lot, would make more use of it. But to that end, I mean, RSAs have been around for a couple of years now. And I know with all of our campaigns, the RSAs are a default setting. Essentially, we're always writing roughly 2 to 3 expanded text ads in one RSA. So it's not terribly surprising that Google's making this a default ad type. In fact, you can still write expanded text ads. You just have to, do it in editor, or if you go actually within the responsive search ad, you can switch back to an expanded text ad. You have the option, but nonetheless, I think RSAs are overall a good idea, and I like the fact that Google will optimize it, hopefully, definitely for click-through rate, but hopefully more towards those conversion goals as well. I just wish we had more of that transparency.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. That would be such a great use for an RSA if you had that data. So, okay, I want to finish on this blog post, though. Of all of the 3 things you mentioned, this one felt like the biggest. We're talking about the privacy stuff. This is, I feel like, all the rage on PPC Twitter. Yep. I had Paula Keller-French on this week's, just released today, of Suds Search. She was talking about iOS upgrades and the ramifications for paid social folks. Google is grappling with similar privacy issues. The big news is they're going to phase out cookies. We have to learn about cohorts, something called the federated learning of cohorts. And I'm wondering if you could just comment generally on this landscape of an emphasis on privacy and how digital marketers might surf this wave.
Sure. I'll start that by Jenny Marvin, who was a longtime contributor or longtime editor of Search Engine Land. recently moved to Google, and she actually just put out a great Q&A session. I believe it was with Amy Bishop about what all these changes mean, and some of the answers were more concrete than others. I think Google is still feeling its way of how to do this, and there's going to certainly be some learnings for it. And in the discussions that have been within the industry and on Twitter, I think people are making a lot of conjectures, but still don't necessarily know how it's ultimately going to play out. But essentially, the idea is that Google is removing, for privacy matters, Google is switching to, it will not be switching to alternative tracking once cookies essentially go away. And of course, Google, because they have so many display network sites across all these other networks. It's concerning because advertisers are worried that how are they going to track these users? Are we going to be able to use remarketing audiences? Are we going to be able to use the in-market audiences, the similar audiences? Mm-hmm. And advertisers are rightfully concerned that some of these targeting options will be taken away. And I think Google, to their standpoint, with the GDRP, California Privacy Act, I believe Virginia just passed a Privacy Act as well. I think Google's taking really a proactive stance to this to better assure users that their privacy is being taken into account. So all that to say is that some of these audience tracking, remarketing, custom combination audiences that Google advertisers have been used to will be going away.
That sounds huge to me. So how does this Google change, this update, how will it impact retargeting ads? How will that, or remarketing
so
ads?
As I've understood this, and certainly it's something I'm still continuing to educate myself on, but remarketing as it exists will still occur across Google properties.
Okay.
I think when users go to, do a search on Google, again, if they've already been to a site and we show them an RSA ad, Google properties can still show remarketing ads. So it's going to be adjusted. I don't think it's totally going away. But to that end, it's certainly not going to be the same as it is today. And for some industries, already remarketing has gone away. I mean, I've worked with a bunch of legal clients over the years who remarketing they haven't been able to use remarketing in ages. So it's certainly going to be a shift. Customer match is going to be that much more important with advertisers submitting their first party data to target these users. I think the federated learning of cohorts, I think that's what Flock, that.
Yeah, could I ask you a question? Do you know how to say this acronym? Is it FLOC or is it Flock? How do you say this acronym? I have no idea. I've read it a bunch of times. I don't know the right way to pronounce
That's
it.
a good. I don't know either. You know what? I'm gonna take a stance and go with Flock, but I'll change that if the industry changes.
That just rolls off the tongue. Flock.
Right.
Okay, good. All right.
So I'm still, I'm still a little unclear how this Flock or federated learning of cohorts works. But essentially the way I see it is it's more of aggregated data that doesn't that won't really breach any privacy issues, and it's more anonymous, to which users can make use of. But how that actually looks and how we implement that in Google Ads, I don't know how that's going to play out.
All right. So I feel like this is the essential question. What are we going to, as digital marketers, are we just now going to have to live with serving up less effective ads? Is that just something we're just going to have to live with?
Yes and no. I think, the great marketers will always find ways to adjust and, use the system within ethical bounds to show great ads to users. Even stuff like video, I mean, that historically really hasn't had great ads, but over the past 5 years, what you've been able to do with video through YouTube and display network partners or sites has been, I think, has been really good and improved greatly.
I agree. Yeah.
So, I think the larger point is just that as advertisers, we need to evolve, and within the rules that are there, just continue to be creative and use the systems we have in place. One concept I always keep in mind is something Fred Valley said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially the machines will always do the efficiency and the automation work the best, but we need the human touch to be able to guide the machine learning. So, and that's how I feel about these changes, all of these. I mean, whether it's, the match types being changed or degraded further, or, RSAs becoming the default ad type, or, cookieless tracking going away. There's definitely more automation and machine learning, but I think as advertisers, we'll continue to guide how it works best. And, as long as we're putting the strategy forth and giving the guidelines, then I think it'll be okay.
All right, awesome. Well, I want to shift gears for a minute to PPC Chat. You're the organizer of this popular phenomenon on Twitter. Tell our audience about it and how they could participate.
Sure. So I actually I founded PPC Chat in April of 2011. So actually, the 10-year anniversary is this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I did step away from the day-to-day management a couple years back. Julie Friedman Bacchini of Neptune, Julie Bacchini Friedman. Sorry, I think I'm saying her name wrong. But anyway, Julie Friedman of Neptune Moon, or she's at Neptune Moon on Twitter. She actually runs the day-to-day chat now. She organizes it. She creates the topics. But essentially what PPC Chat is a weekly Twitter chat every Tuesday at noon Eastern time, where there's a new topic and the moderator asks a bunch of questions. The topic changes every week. It's the latest industry news. I know a chat a couple weeks ago was about just what we're talking about, the latest industry news and happenings. We'll get into specific topics like Facebook ads, retargeting, shopping ads. I know Julie has, over the past year or so, expanded its reach through other platforms. I know they're using Clubhouse a bit more, testing that out. So essentially, but what it comes down to is PPC Chat it's not only just a weekly chat to get PPC industry professionals together, but it's an ongoing hashtag that people can use to ask questions, share blog posts, get feedback. And it's just this great online community that has really developed over these last 10 years. And, I kind of in my wildest imagination, I didn't think it would be what it is today, but I'm so happy that it has become this and people find it so valuable.
Wow, it's an amazing community, and congratulations, 10 years. That's unbelievable.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, the community has made it what it is, and people adapting it and wanting to, stay in touch with others.
All right. Well, I have just one. This is sort of like a rant of mine. Is this? You wrote a blog post about the Google Ads recommendation tool, the tool that they have that our clients go into and go, why don't I have a 100% score? And you have to explain that, okay, it's a tool, it runs a scan, it can't possibly comprehend a marketing strategy completely. I'll be honest with you, it sometimes is just an annoyance to I think, to me, especially because the clients go in and look at it. So I kind of tune it out. But maybe I read your article, maybe I'm missing something. When should people check Google's recommendations? When has this tool been useful to you?
Yeah, so I think it's good if you want a high-level Google perspective, and I'll say that in air quotes, Google perspective, because you want to see how they're viewing your account. Even if you don't agree with everything they're saying, you want to understand how they're looking at it. So I find it most useful for more of the menial stuff, like finding ad groups that don't have responsive search ads, finding areas where I can remove redundant keywords. I generally don't pay too much attention to, the more sophisticated recommendations, such as changing a bid strategy or something like that, because that doesn't those recommendations don't take into account what, as advertisers, we know the client's goals are, and that's where the machines and the humans work best together. For those more menial items, I'm okay with those recommendations, and generally will make them if they make sense. But like a bid strategy, if Google's telling me to do a target CPA bidding strategy of $200 in a campaign where I'm spending, $50 a day, I'm not going to do it. It's just not going to make sense. So I think with all these recommendations, they are worthwhile to at least look at, whether it's whether it's once a month, once a quarter. And some of them are just housekeeping things that are easy to take care of. But as I mentioned in the article, everything you see there should be taken with a grain of salt.
All right. Well, great. Well, let's do a couple things to wrap up here. Can you tell us a little bit about where you're working now, what you're doing there, and what sorts of clients you work with?
Sure. So I'm a key account director at Brainlabs, which was formerly Hennepin Marketing. So about a year ago, we merged with Brainlabs and Distilled, actually, SEO. And Brainlabs has been based out of the UK primarily for its existence. Daniel Gilbert is the founder and owner of Brainlabs. So Hennepin merged with them. And we work with clients across all verticals, whether it be e-com, B2C, education, any vertical you can think of, we work on it. And, we work with clients, smaller clients, to really enterprise level / global clients. So, and I think as we've merged, something that has really been evident is that we're not just a PPC agency anymore, or an SEO agency anymore, for that matter. We try to find the best solutions that work for our clients, and that involves, looking at, additional items like, programmatic, moving to search ads 360, finding, analytic solutions and consulting that work best for the clients. So we're still all within that digital marketing realm, but it's not just the PPC and SEO anymore. It's many of these other inputs that you do have in the digital marketing industry.
I see. Well, great. Well, if people want to reach out to you or learn more about Brainlabs, how should they do that?
Yeah, so you can always just find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, our website. Just brainlabsdigital.com. And then me personally, you can always email me, matt.umbro@brainlabsdigital.com. You can find me on Twitter, Matt_Umbro. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I actually don't know what my public profile is LinkedIn, but if you just type in Matt Umbro, then you'll find me. And then, of course, PPC Chat. If you just search that hashtag on Twitter, you'll see all the conversation going on there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that you've been merciful with no April Fool's jokes. I am on guard all day, and I hope you get to enjoy some of this opening day action. So I'm going to sign off with a virtual cheers for you. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Suds Search.
Thanks, Mark.